Welcome everybody to that word chat. It's good to see everybody. I am Mark Allen, your host. As some of you know, I think we have a bunch of people from Australia today, which is great because we're going to Australia for our guest, Malini Devadas. Malini Devadas. You know, I would say it incorrectly. Emphasis on the first syllable, she said. Let me do a quick introduction. Malini has been editing for, I think, about 16 years, first in-house and since 2013 independently. And as a freelance editor, she's experienced some of the things we all feel, feast and famine cycle. Well, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but the feast and famine cycle of freelancing is certainly a thing. The challenges to confidence, especially when we're starting out. We're going to ask her about growing a business, starting a business, and growing a business. And I'm curious to know what she calls the marketing confidence conundrum, like the sound of that. So we're going to ask her about that. Something I can identify with. She comes to us from Canberra, the capital of Australia, where it's about 8:30 in the morning, I think. Good morning, Malini. Malini, excuse me.
No, it's Malini. Oh,
Malini.
you got it right the first time. It's
Malini. Oh, okay. So I
confused you.
I hyper corrected. I do that all the time. Okay. So Malini. How's your morning? How's tomorrow?
Yes, that's right. I'm coming to you from the future Wednesday morning here. This is the first thing I'm doing today. So it's summer holidays for my kids, so we're very much relaxed mode. So like I was saying to some others earlier, just had to make sure I set my alarm so I could get up in time to do this at 8:30. But that's quite civilized, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, that's something I think people will. There are a lot of copy editors in the audience today. Not everybody, but certainly people who are interested enough in the topic. And so there's a lot of questions, I think, about like process and how you do things. So here's the first thing. Let's start since this morning. What time do you normally? Are you normally this up and fresh and ready to go at 8:30?
Well, because I've got two school-age children, I have to get out of bed in the morning.
Okay.
So I think if it were up to me, I'm very much a night owl. So if I just lived alone or didn't have to adhere to another schedule, I'd be very much a late afternoon, evening. That's when I would do my work. But as it is, I have to get up in the morning, and then I find my brain doesn't really kick in till the afternoon. But by the time it does, the kids are home from school, and I've got to do things. So I've learnt to work with the times that suit me. But I really like nighttime, and when everyone's in bed and asleep and the house is quiet, I find that's a good time for me to work. And I think it took me a while to accept that was okay, that the clients don't care when I do my work as I'm doing the work.
Right.
But once I embrace that, I just go with what's easier for me.
Well, and when I give, when people ask me my advice, I'm always a little bit reluctant to give it because I think, what do I know? Which is probably common. But I often say, don't do, here's what I think is good advice. It's not necessarily what I do. And so my work schedule as a freelancer is sort of all over the place. And I think that's one advantage to being a freelancer. I tell the neighbors I'm retired because they see me outside, walking down to the coffee shop in the middle of the day or whatever. But I find that that's an advantage. Some people work, I think, probably have set hours and that works for them. Is that true? Do you find in talking to different people about their approach, is that are a lot of people like me, they sort of work when they feel like it and then procrastinate for much of the day?
Yeah, I mean, our work is very deadline driven, and I think that helps for a lot of us because when something's due, it's due. I think it really is personality dependent. So some people like the structure, and maybe it's imposed by having kids or whatever it is. They like the routine and the structure. Other people, and I'm someone who finds too much structure sort of. I don't find freedom in that. Like, I like the flexibility like you do. So I like the fact that I can schedule my time. But of course, when there's something due, it's kind of, I've got to get it done. And so that kind of takes over.
Right. And
But I did start exercising a few years ago regularly, and I do that once the kids have gone to school in the morning because I just find that suits me better. And so the first part of the day is kind of taken up with that, and doing whatever other errands I need to do while I'm out, and then sort of late morning after lunch is when I kind of get into it.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I should. I do find that my time at the computer tends to be much longer than a regular work day because, I get to the end of the day and I'm finding like, oh, now I've got to really actually work when I thought I was going to do this earlier. I've got to finish it up. So what is? Tell us what is the marketing confidence conundrum of which you speak?
Okay, well, actually, when I saw that in your promo material, I'm not sure that I actually coined that term, but I like it, so I'm
Oh,
going to run with that.
okay. All right. Well, we'll say
I
you
think
did. Nobody
I
knows.
think what I see in not just for editors, but anyone trying to sell themselves or sell their services is that when we start out, we don't feel confident, and that's when we need to do the most marketing really to get clients. But it's really hard to market yourself when you haven't had much work experience. You don't feel that you know what you're doing, and so we're sort of stuck. Whereas when we're fully booked or heavily booked, or we've got lots of inquiries coming in, it's a lot easier to do the marketing because we're busy, we've got happy clients, we know we're doing a good job,
Right.
but we don't necessarily need the work. And the
Right.
feast and famine you talked about is partly that, because when we're busy we stop marketing because we're busy. And then when we lose a few jobs, or we just don't get any inquiries, that's when we need to do the marketing. But again, our confidence drops because all of a sudden, why is no one contacting me? Did my clients not like what I did? And we start questioning ourselves. And so it's just that cycle. And so that's why I think it's better to make marketing a constant, regular thing we just do, no matter how busy we are or how quiet we are. So we're just doing it all the time. And then we get out of this, it just becomes a habit. It's part of your routine. We're not dependent on how we feel about ourselves to decide to do
Right.
marketing.
Right. So your background is in neuroscience, and then you made the transition to what is the advice you give? Is it based on that? Is there a connection there, or is it
No, it's completely random. So I
Yeah.
finished school, did a degree, didn't know what to do, did an honours year, which is like a mini thesis year. Enjoyed that, and then decided to do a PhD. And I was quite young, straight out of school and into the degree and into the PhD. Was lucky enough to get a scholarship to do the PhD, and this was in the 90s where scholarships were generous relative to the cost of living at that time. So I had a pretty good life, did my PhD, didn't love it. Found the writing of the thesis relatively straightforward, was going to leave research after that, but my supervisor said, why don't you do a postdoc overseas, live overseas, see if you'd like a different type of project. And I was lucky that a job just landed in my lap literally the next day. An email came from a professor in Japan. He said, do you have someone who'd come to Japan who's an English speaker? And so I went and did that. Got a fellowship there, so it kind of dragged on this career I didn't really want. But when that finished, I just thought, this is enough. I'm not cut out for academia. And I came back to Canberra and did struggled to work out what to do. But I just sort of fell into, I met a woman who ran an editing agency, and I was interested in the science communication. I think that was the thing I was interested in, like, helping people understand the science. And I didn't want to go into TV or radio or sort of print media, but I met a woman randomly who ran this editing agency, and she did government editing, so government scientific reports. And I just thought, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want to do. So I just wrote to her and said, can I work with you? And she said, well, funnily enough, I've got one editor on staff and I'm looking to get a second person, and I'd love to have a scientist who could learn to become an editor. So, I was very fortunate to work there for 10 years, learnt on the job, did some further study. But yeah, completely nothing to do with the neuroscience. It's just kind of like a lot of ex-academics that get into editing. It's just I found that the writing was the best part of the job, whereas most of my colleagues hated writing and they liked generating the data. So I think that's how I ended up there.
Right. And that's interesting that I mean, I think a lot of people would like to do that. They like to say, oh, I'd like to do a job in editing, write to somebody, and end up, doing that. But that doesn't seem like a normal thing, a normal path. Yeah.
No, I was very lucky. I was really, because I actually I worked there for 10 years. I had time off when I had my kids and I went back part-time. But at one point I was the person who actually dealt with the inquiries that came into my boss, that came in every week from people, over that period from 2004 to 2013, the number of people who were interested in becoming an editor just increased. And obviously she couldn't, by then the business had grown a bit, but not to the extent of taking on all these extra people. So really it was just lucky timing. And, it's really hard to break in now. I was just very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time.
Did you consider yourself an editor before that, before you're doing a PhD, or there's no?
No, I had no idea this was a thing. I actually remember when I stumbled and looked at her website and was learning about what they did and talking to her about that. I was actually shocked that, because I, as a child, I read a lot, never thought about the process of the book being published, just read the books. When I worked in Japan, I wrote papers, and I also got everyone asking me to help them with their papers. And actually last night I was thinking about this, that I remember I would fix people's English kind of thing, but obviously didn't know anything about copy editing. So I'd fix the grammar. And I remember once a journal sent back my paper or someone's paper and they'd copy edited it. And I just went, what are all these changes? What have they done to my paper? And my colleagues were going, I thought you fixed our English. And I said, well, I thought I had. All these things. So I think when I started working as an editor, that was a big shock to me, actually, because I was naturally good at the structural kind of thing and the story, but the copy editing and that sort of editorial consistency I'd never thought about before. And I remember my first day on the job, my boss got me to just edit something as a practice exercise, and then she showed me what the proper editor had actually done. And when I saw how many things I'd missed, I realized, like a lot of people who come to editing, we think we kind of know how to edit, but we don't actually until we see, or we do some training, or we learn from somebody and see just how much there is that needs attention.
So when did you decide to do the help others, advise others, and do the sort of the editing, coaching, and training side of your business?
So with I guess when I set up my own business, which was in 2013, I was doing some editing, but before that I had been doing training courses or running workshops for academics, helping them write. So I kept doing that through my own business. And what I noticed is that, a lot of people, I guess, getting information is quite easy these days. So I could see that people could come to the workshop, feel motivated and inspired on the day, and then nothing changes. Actually changing your practice is quite hard. So there was that there. I really enjoyed the structural editing and talking with the authors more than I did the copy editing and proofreading. So I decided, I also was really busy with young children. My mother was unwell at the time, so I really had limited time. And I sort of accidentally, again, stumbled into the world of online business. So I decided to put one of my workshops online and create a course, an e-course. This is probably 5 years ago now. And through that, I ended up in this business incubator of other business women from all different industries and professions, and we're all there trying to grow our online businesses. And what I noticed is that the people who had success were the people who were putting themselves out there, doing the marketing. Wasn't always, sometimes the best people at their craft weren't getting the work, not because they couldn't do it, but because they didn't know how to promote themselves. So all these ideas I had all these ideas in my head, and I could see, I guess, when I looked at the editing profession, the same thing. A lot of people who were really talented, but were struggling to get work. And I just became fascinated I discovered the world of coaching through these groups, and was really fascinated to see how much of it was just people just deciding they were going to do something and doing it, or talking themselves out of doing something. And I guess maybe this relates to the neuroscience, but I was just really interested in that whole concept. And so what I've done now is brought coaching into both my businesses. So actually for academics, I do very little editing these days. I do the workshops, but a lot of it is coaching to help academics feel more confident to do more writing, to make the time to write, to do all those things. And then for editors, I decided, I guess having been in the profession for 16 years, I was frustrated to see talented people not getting work. I was tired of hearing lots of editors say there's no money, no one wants to pay us, no one knows what we're doing. And I thought maybe I can help change that, because I know there are people who will pay us and who value what we do. And so now I offer that sort of mindset coaching to editors as well, because I can see a lot of it is just changing the way we think about ourselves and our skills and our business. And often the biggest impediment for most of us is ourselves. It's not other people or other things. And we can control that. And so that's both the businesses in parallel have kind of gone off in this new direction of coaching.
Okay. So, and people are probably asking, well, how do we control that? So on your website, you say mastering your mindset can be the key to growing your business. What does that mean, mastering your mindset, and how do we go about it?
So there's a few things. I think the first thing that can be helpful for people to do is just really stop and listen to what your mind is telling you when you. So for a common example I see is people say they want to write a blog post or post on social media, and maybe they've written the blog post, they can't bring themselves to publish it, or they've got an idea for something to tweet about, but they never do it, even though it would only take them a couple of minutes. So it's not a lack of time. It's just they talk themselves out of it. And so it doesn't happen. And then they talk about it for weeks. And I've done this too, talked about something for ages and not actually done it. And when I've thought about why that is, it's actually just stopping to hear what you're actually telling yourself. So maybe it's no one will want to hear this. Who am I to tell people what to do? There's already 100 other bloggers out there talking about this, all these stories that we tell ourselves. So I think the first step, if you find that you're not doing something you've talked about doing or you say you want to do, the first thing is just to stop and listen to that. Because even that can be quite enlightening if you just stop and listen to why am I not doing the thing. And then you can decide, you can decide if you want to make a decision and say, no one wants to hear what I have to say, so I'm not going to blog. That's a decision you can make. But for most people, they say, oh, I really want to do this thing. I really want to, I'm going to set up a blog, I'm going to have an email newsletter, whatever it is, if you keep talking about it, saying you want to do it, but then you're letting these stories in your head stop you from doing it. The first thing is just to acknowledge, I'm actually scared. If you can just say to yourself, actually, the truth is I'm scared to tweet because someone might not like it. And I think that's the first step, is just acknowledging what the actual problem is, because then you can start to examine that fear. Is it valid? What's the worst thing that can happen? All those, there's lots of questions you can ask yourself. But for most of us, it's easier to just blame the audience, our clients, the economy, the situation, whatever it is. It's easy to say, I want to do this thing, but I can't do it until I've done 100 other things. Actually, you could just write a tweet. It's not, it's not going to be the end of the world. So there's that. There's also the way you think about money. So that's a huge one for a lot of editors, whether this comes down to the way we set our rates, what we quote. A common scenario is a job comes in, we want a quote on it, we do the maths, the number is huge, then we think, and we decide the client's not going to pay that, without even knowing the client well, without actually asking them. We just decide they're not going to pay that, or I'm not worth that much money, or, that's too much for an editor to make. And so we reduce the quote. And I know this is common. I used to do it too. And I know I've spoken to lots of editors who do this. We reduce the quote, then we get the job, then we don't have enough hours to do the job. And so we're doing unpaid hours. And again, if you just stop and think, is that a reasonable assumption? You have to make those decisions. But for a lot of people, it's a reflex. We don't even stop to think, why am I reducing the quote? It's just we do it as a habit. And then we suffer the consequences.
Right. And that's a confidence thing too, starting out. I think a lot of people feel like if they don't have, they feel that one way to break into the business is to offer $15, $20 American rate on their work, or even less. I mean, I've seen jobs asking. I've been asked to work for amounts to $10 an hour, $12 an hour, and I imagine, and I say no, but of course I know that there are probably people out there who are willing to do that, and maybe it's valid somewhat for somebody just starting out to break in that way, but then it does sort of bring the whole thing down. The whole, it makes it more difficult for people who are established and trying to make money off this. So how much?
So I think I have a different view on that in the sense that I agree. I think when you're starting out, so I always say to people, when you're starting out, you just have to get those first jobs. You need to get your confidence. So whenever I offer a new service, like when I started coaching, when I started whatever it is, I always have introductory prices for anything. So if I'm launching an e-course or whatever it is, I'll always have an introductory price. I'll make it very clear this is for a limited time till I get more experience. So the client knows they're getting a great bargain. And so it puts a limit for me as well, because it helps me set a boundary that I'm not going to offer this price forever. At some point, I have to put the price up. And I actually don't have I guess for me, when I work with editors, all I'm interested in is whether they want to earn more or they need to earn more. I don't worry about what the rest of the world is doing, because it's impossible. There's always going to be someone cheaper than me. And who am I to tell someone else their price is too low when there's someone who charges more than me who could say that to me when I think my prices are high, So in the end, it all becomes relative. People who contact me don't know any other editors. I get my work through referrals and making connections myself. They don't know, mostly academics. They wouldn't even know another editor to ask. They wouldn't have a clue how my price compares to other people. But if price is an issue for them, I'll happily send them to the iPad directory or to, another editor. And I'll happily say there's people that charge less than me, and it's not necessarily a correlation between price and quality as well, because there's lots of great editors who don't charge as much as me probably. So in the end, I just don't worry about what other people are doing. I just seek out people who can pay what I would charge, who are happy to pay what I charge, who value what I do. And, I think if we spend too much time worrying about what other people are charging, it just gets, it's just another complication we don't need. But my job is, with however many millions of academics around the world, there's got to be 10 or 20 people who want to pay my rates. That's how I look at it. And my job is to find those people and not worry about all the other people who don't want to pay. So, but yeah, certainly when you're starting out, I think having introductory, prices is okay. I think for me, the thing is just making that decision. If you decide I'm going to quote this much per hour, then do the quote for that much per hour, and you've made the decision. You get the job, you do the job, you move on to the next job. Maybe you put your prices up. But what I see happening is people who have their rate they need or want to earn, and then bringing the whole price down on the quote, not because of any logical reason, but simply because they convince themselves the client won't pay that. And I think that's where then you're saying you charge $50 an hour, but you're earning $30 an hour because you didn't actually quote the full amount. So I think just being honest with why you're making those decisions and being honest about the numbers to yourself is the best place to start. And when you have confidence in your rates, it makes the client feel more confident. So if you're underconfident about what you're charging, that lack of confidence can come through to the client, and then they're thinking, well, does she know what she's doing, or what, whereas if I just say, this is what it's going to cost, take it or leave it. Obviously I'm in a position where I can afford to do that now, but they're more likely to say, okay, this is what it cost. Whether they can afford it or not is a different thing, but it's not a reflection of me. It's either in their budget or it's not. It's something they want to invest in or they don't, and that's their decision. And I can't control that, so I don't try.
I have found myself, and I've stopped myself from doing this, but sort of apologizing for the rate when I do quote a rate. So I'll explain, why something will cost a certain amount, and then I have the sense to go through and delete all that, because it doesn't really, they don't really care, honestly. They just want to know what the rate is, and if it's uncomfortable for them, then they'll perhaps go somewhere else. I do have a difficult time, to be honest, with self-published authors who come to me, because I realize that what I'm going to quote them is going to be any profit they're going to make on their book, most likely. And I think people go in with a sense that they have a story to tell, they want to say something, but realistically, it's a first book. They've only got the one book. It's fiction. They're not well known. They're really not going to make a lot of money off it. And when I quote them my rate, it's usually, embarrassingly, I'm embarrassed to do it. But as you say, I think I do what is comfortable for me, and if that's not what's comfortable for them, then there are other places they can go. So I'm going to keep asking lots of questions. There are room full of people. I assume most of them are interested because they are in business for themselves, or they're interested in copy editing as a freelance endeavor. If there are some examples anybody has that you want to share with us, best practices, the stories that the way you have handled things that may be a little different and a little bit insightful, let us know, and we'll get you into the conversation. And of course, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them in the room. Heather is our producer and showrunner, and she will keep track of all that and keep you honest. So you deal with you do a podcast, which is people asking questions, right? So and do you get questions from all over the world, all of the English-speaking world with that? Tell us about how that got started, and what has that been a positive? I'm going to back up a little bit. A lot of what you do and I do and a lot of people do, I think, is we put out information and share advice, and we don't make any money off it. I don't think you're making much money off your podcast, I assume. But what's the motivation there, and what's the reward for you in doing that? I know I asked you 4 questions there.
Okay. So this podcast endeavor was a typical one for me, where I talked about it for 2 years and didn't actually do anything about it because I was scared, right? So what if people don't like it? What if no one listens to it? What if I can't think of something to talk about, which is unlikely because I can talk about anything for any length of time. But a couple of years ago, one of the things I decided to do was to hire some support in my business, because I could see that I was not just because I needed some administrative support, but because I don't do things if I'm scared. Whereas if someone else is involved and I've told them we're doing this podcast, that's some accountability for me. And I know I get bored with admin tasks. I'm not great with the tech stuff. And I use those as excuses. So it's really easy. I'm the excuse queen. I can come up with a million excuses why I shouldn't do something. So it's too hard to work out the software. It's too hard to do this. I don't have time, whatever. So I signed up to do a podcasting course, an e-course, which was great. And when I first had the idea, it was going to be for my academic editing business. So the first idea I had was a show where I talk about, writing tips for academics or something. And I just couldn't work out how, I had this idea and that was it. And I couldn't really develop it any further. So then I switched to the EditBiz podcast, because for me, and it's true, it's a form of content marketing. The podcast per se doesn't bring any income in. But what I realized is that a lot of editors don't really know what coaching is. And it's a really hard thing to describe. But what I thought I could do is just demonstrate it, because I thought, well, if I just get people who come on the show and I can coach them through a problem, that gives them an idea of what it is I do. It's providing a service, obviously it's helping people, but it's a way to establish some credibility, to get my name out there, for people to get to know me. And I've certainly made money indirectly from that, because people have heard the podcast and bought my course, or heard the podcast and wanted to work with me privately. So it's just like blogging or social media posting, whatever it is. It's just putting out content that helps people, that shows what I actually do and tries to sort of demonstrate what coaching is. So there's an educational component to that. I enjoy it because I love connecting with people, and I think, again, through those connections, someone might recommend me to someone else or ask me to do a presentation for their local editing group. So it's just I love it because it's not video, so I don't have to comb my hair or whatever it is. It's quite low stress in that sense, so that's always good. And really, it's not that difficult. It's just to have a conversation, record it, and Jenny, my assistant, does make sure it actually goes out there. Because again, I could say I could have done the interview part because that's fun and easy for me, and then I would have stalled, found reasons to not do it. So, having someone else involved does keep me accountable. But really, it was just the idea. I listen to other podcasts that have a similar format. When I first put it out there, so that was about, I think, February last year, I was hoping to get all these editors who would come on the show, and no one wanted to come on the show because it was new, and why would they? So I just took questions and answered them by myself. But then the second time when I put a call out, I think people were a bit more familiar with it. And once the first few brave souls came on and did it, I think other people heard that and realized it wasn't as scary, and it was could be quite helpful. So yeah, no, I'm having a lot of fun with it. And this year I'm going to bring in some experts as well on various aspects of growing a business, just to give another dimension to that. So yeah, so I really enjoy it. And I think, you know, for any kind of content marketing, it's better if it's something you enjoy. So I'd much
Sure.
rather do that than
Well,
write a blog post, for example. So
right.
that's where I put my energies. Yep.
Well, and a lot of people just, I mean, that's one thing I hear all the time. I love the editing, I love the working with words, but I just don't want to do any marketing. And I'm not a overt person. I'm an introvert. It's very common among editors. What do you tell people when they? I'm sure you've heard that too. What do you tell people when they're come to you and say, just give me the work. Don't give me the. Don't make me do anything.
So there's a few responses that I can think of there. So the first thing is you can decide to not do the marketing and to subcontract to another editor, to work for a publishing, you know, contract to a
Mm-hmm.
publishing a publisher, whatever it is. So that's a decision you can make. But if you prefer to work for yourself, then, you know, again, it's just those ideas and thoughts and beliefs that you have. So the introvert extrovert thing is quite interesting, and I'm not an expert on these, you know, descriptors. But what I would
Mm-hmm.
say is, you know, I describe myself as a classic extrovert. You know, I thrive on the connection with people. Um, I'm happy to talk to a room full of people, and I don't feel shy about doing that. But I hated posting online when I first started. Like, I hated it, and felt very self-conscious because in a room full of people, I can read their response. You know, I can make a connection with them. I can see if they're bored. Like when I was giving workshops in person, um, I could see if someone was bored or someone was engaged. When I started, you know, doing things online, it was really hard for me because when I do a webinar, it's in webinar mode. I can't see the
Right.
responses.
Right.
Um, and so it's the same thing for the online world. I know lots of online business people, business women in particular, who have a huge social media presence, and they describe themselves as introverts, and they hate going to conferences and they hate, you know, going to things with people, but they feel really comfortable putting content out there. So I think just saying I'm an introvert, I can't do social media, those two things don't have to correlate. I think the true thing,
Right.
and that's where I said before, it's really questioning why. What's the fear? What am I worried is going to happen? And I think for most people, when they explore that, it is just, you know, fear of rejection, fear of being criticized, fear of no one liking it. Those are the things that stop most people, because
Mm-hmm.
it's actually quite easy to just tweet something, you know, and most of us are happy to tweet about something that's personal or photo of their pet or whatever it is. So it's just when we're talking about ourselves, we feel uncomfortable. When we're asking for money, we feel uncomfortable. When
Mm-hmm.
we seem to be bragging about our skills, you know, we're conditioned to not do that. And so that's usually the true um, reason that most people don't put themselves out there. And the way to, you know, one way I like to think about it is to turn the tables a little bit and think, you know, to take the focus off me or ourselves and just think about the reader, which is what we do as editors anyway. So instead of thinking about it as I'm just talking about myself, I'm trying to help more editors or academics, whoever they are, with my content, and I can help them even more if they work with me. So actually putting the content out there is for their benefit, to help more people, not because I want to talk about myself necessarily, if that makes sense.
Right.
So if you think as an editor, if you think there's all these authors out there that don't know what an editor does, that don't know they need an editor, that have got their book half finished and are never going to publish it, you know, they need your help. And it's up to us to help people
Mm-hmm.
by putting our content out there. And some of it they can just, there's free content they can just take and use themselves. But we also need to offer our services to people so that they can finish
Right.
their book. And I think it's the
Right.
money, for me, I think it's the money thing that gets in the way. So I often say to editors, if you could just promote your business and didn't have to charge anything, if you could just do your business for free, would you have any problem marketing yourself? And
Well,
for a
and
lot of
that
Hmm.
people,
that ties really well into a marketing related question we did have from someone who's watching. Meredith, would you like to unmute and ask?
Unmute audio. Okay, can hear me, Malini?
yes, hello.
Hi, Malini. I know Malini, and I'm from Australia. Malini, I just wanted to know, you were talking about the marketing, and I wanted to know how you structured that, particularly since you've also told us that you like to work in an unstructured way. So how do you market every day?
So this is a good question, because until recently there was no structure. It didn't happen very often. So what I realized last year is I just needed to have, you know, a schedule. So so this, the two businesses. So for Edit Boost, I have a group. So anyone who wants to join the group is welcome to do so. It's the Edit Boost community on Facebook. So that's a free group. And, you know, I do have a kind of schedule for just putting content out there. The podcast comes out once a week on the same day each week. So again, that's a regular thing that happens. And I have an email newsletter. So now the email newsletter, I did the classic create a newsletter, send a few emails, not email anyone for ages, then feel like I couldn't disturb them and I hadn't written to them for ages and what am I going to say? So I started with my academic editing business. I also was in the same boat. So what I decided to do with the Edit Boost newsletter is just email every week, because that just, again, when I publicly announce something, then I'm more likely to do it. So I just said, I'm going to be emailing you every week, and then I have to. So really for me, it's just looking at what I do, try to do things that feel easy and not stressful. So I like email marketing as a strategy, because I think email, for one thing, you get more people actually reading it, whereas when you post something on social media, it can be very haphazard and no one sees it. And so for my academic audience, I run webinars once a month. So again, there's a schedule built in and I've got a team that helps me with that. So it's that having that regular routine. So I do the webinar once a month. So I've started with this year emailing them once a week as well. So I just try to create things like the podcast or the webinars that create value, that promote what I'm doing, that gives me something to talk about. And with the social media, I'm creating a Facebook page at the moment. I haven't had a Facebook page for my business yet, so I'm going to do that for the Edit Boost business so I can reach more people. For my academic audience, I'm on Twitter, but it's really haphazard, like literally. I'm not, it's like Mark said earlier, do as I say, not as I do. But I did an experiment in September where I did tweet pretty much every day, and I got more inquiries because I was out there promoting myself and people heard about me. Yesterday, I decided to just tweet about my coaching for academics. I said, if you're struggling with your, burnt out, not writing anything, message me. And straight away, someone messaged me and was interested in coaching. So, the thing is, it's a balance between putting content out there, but also you have to ask for the sale at some point. So if you're just putting content out to help people, which is fine, and you never mention I'm an editor or I have openings, people will just assume you're busy. They won't think, you can't expect people to make that leap to get this newsletter every fortnight or whatever it is, and then contact you. You have to ask them, you have to say, if you need help, contact me and we can have a conversation, and that's where a lot of content marketers fall down, because they just put free content out there all the time and never actually say, hey, you can work with me if you want to, and if you want more help and you want to get your book finished. So to answer Meredith's question, I think you just have to create a schedule that works for you and just start doing something, like even if it's just once a week to start with. But the problem with the confidence is we wait till we feel confident, and we'll never feel confident. Like literally, we'll never feel confident waiting, like sitting around waiting. Oh, I'll start tweeting when I feel confident. You just have to start tweeting. And then once you realize, even if no one likes your tweet, the world didn't end, you can still do it again. And once you start building up a regular, doing it regularly, you'll get more followers or you'll get more engagement. But it takes time, but you have to start. So starting is the first hurdle, and then doing it consistently and over a long period is the second hurdle. People just kind of give up. They send a few tweets and they go, I didn't get any work, I'll give up on that. But it does take, the people who have success have usually been doing it for a long time to get to that point. So I hope I answered the question, Meredith. But yes, just set a schedule that works for you and just start doing something. It's going to look different for all of us.
Thank you for the question, Meredith. Thank you for getting up in the morning. I'm usually up by, with the sun, so 8:30 is not terribly early, but it's, like you say, it's getting up and actually putting on your bow tie and combing your hair if you have any, that, is part of the effort. So I think we have another question from the room.
Yes, we do. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly. Penele had a question. If you want to unmute and ask. Let's see. All right, I can ask on their behalf. The question was, what's the going rate for editing right now? What should, what are we looking for in terms of rate?
Well, that's a great question that I cannot answer because there is no. So this is the problem. There's no going rate. Although it doesn't have to be a problem because I actually, don't really need someone to tell me a rate. But it's really hard when you're starting out to pick a rate. This is probably the number one question new editors have is what rate do I set? So, that my advice to people is the problem is if you set a rate that doesn't feel comfortable for you at your stage, you're going to find it really hard to promote yourself. So if you price yourself, if you set a rate because someone else told you to set that rate and it's too high for what you actually feel you deserve, whatever your own internal thermostat tells you is right for you, you won't you won't promote yourself. So one thing that can help is to do the maths, is to actually just look at how much money you need to earn. And when I work with editors to do this, one thing we discover is they sort of falsely think they're going to work 8 hours a day, 8 billable hours a day. And most editors would do 3, 4, or 5 billable hours a day. I mean, even if you're sitting at your desk from 9 to 5, you can't do 8. Most people cannot do 8 billable hours unless the deadline is 5 p.m. They've got a day to do it. So the first thing that can be useful is to just work out what you need to earn in a year, a month, a week, a day. And even if you don't feel that you can charge that right now, that's something you can work towards. So if you know that to pay your bills, you need to charge $50 an hour, but you've just started out and you can't bring yourself to charge that much, you might need to get a part-time job, you might need to look for other sources of income and then start at the rate you feel comfortable with till you get some jobs, till you get some testimonials, till you get some happy clients, and then increase the rate. So I know that's a non-answer, but the reason it's a non-answer is because it's a global economy. There's editors all over the world all charging different prices. Even within Australia, there'd be people charging, $20 to more than $100 an hour. It's impossible to pick a rate. Now, some organisations have published what they think of as acceptable rates. So IPED, which is Australia, New Zealand professional organisation, had a working group or working party last year. They published some rates on their website, which sort of say this is, and it's more for our clients so they can see this is what we think editors should charge. But again, if you don't feel confident in that, and this is where the mindset thing comes in, because if your mind is telling you that's way too much for me to charge, then you're going to really struggle to put that to a client. Sometimes people can't even accept to themselves what they think they need to charge or earn. So I would just say just start with something, but look at your the important thing is just look at your finances and see what you actually need to be earning. And if you can't charge that, you need to work out how to get that money from somewhere till you start. I mean, I gradually eased into my freelance business because I was working for the other the agency, then I was part-time because I had my kids, and then I was casual, and then I studio contracting for them. So it was a very slow transition to building up my business. But if you're just starting out with no income, it's quite daunting. It's a lot of stress there. So I think, whatever your rates are, just own the rates and then just know you're going to put them up as you get more experience until you reach that number, because the number is different for all of us. And it's impossible for me to give anyone a number. Even if you look at rates charts from organisations, it has a huge range, like this much per hour, this many pages to this many pages per hour. Like, it's meaningless, really. And a lot of those things come from surveys where you've surveyed the members, and that's random. Like, it depends who fills out the survey. So, it's just very difficult. Pricing is something. When I moved into coaching, I had exactly the same experience, and actually my experience is transitioning to a new career parallel what editors face. It's who am I to do coaching? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just new. Some coaches charge, $1,000 an hour. Some charge $50 an hour. It's the same thing. No one, it's not regulated. Anyone can call themselves a coach. There's so many parallels, but I just had to start with something, and then I've just gradually put the prices up, and now it feels comfortable for me, and so I will stick with that till I decide to change them later.
So I found that while that's true, I found almost, or I shouldn't say universal, but very common, that a lot of editors tell me that they should be charging more, and then they do charge more, and they said, wow, it worked, I'm now charging more. And it's a difficult thing to sort of make that leap. But I suspect that many editors are undercharging, not only for what they could be earning, but for what they really want to be earning. Is that probably true?
Yeah, I think a lot of people haven't really thought about there's what they want to be earning, and then it's what they believe they deserve to earn. So this is the issue, is that deep down, and I run this exercise with when I do workshops. But we've all got a sort of limit in our head about what we think we should earn as an editor. So there'd be a point at which I'd probably don't think I could earn $500,000 a year as an editor. So obviously there's a number probably less than that. But for all of us, there's a point at which, or we don't think we could charge more than X per hour. And again, it's different. Right. So that's an internal belief that has nothing to do with the client. And the problem is we impose our own ideas about money onto our quotes without knowing, or we make judgments on the client based on their type of work or what we think they would pay. We have no idea what their own money beliefs are. So that's where we run into difficulties, because we start second guessing ourselves and thinking we should be charging more. I think, as you mentioned, the example is where editors don't want the work. So someone contacts them, they're not interested in doing the work, so they triple their rates because they don't want it, and then they win it. I think what that shows to me is the detachment. It's detaching from, it's not attributing meaning to that. So if you like, and like you said earlier, Mark, if someone comes to you and it's their book they've written and they're probably not going to make any money from it, you're attaching it, you've got some emotional connection there, you feel bad for them, that really influences the way you would quote. It could influence the way you quote. Whereas if we've got a project we don't want, then we just jack up our rates because we don't want it. And then it turns out the person pays it. I think that's a really powerful demonstration of how we can't predict. We could have half our rate and someone would say it's too expensive. Or we can triple our rate and someone says, yep, I'll pay that. It's so subjective, and we impose our own beliefs, especially when we don't value our own skills. So we think anyone could edit this. Like, it's not that hard. But actually, no, the point is the author can't edit it and they need you to do it. So we discount our skills. We don't think we deserve to earn that much. Some people compare themselves to other people in their family and say, well, they're only earning this much. And I see this a lot with online business too, or where you're creating leverage products like e-courses, the guilt around earning money for something that's easy for them, when you might have someone in your family who works a really hard job who doesn't get paid much. And then there's just so many things to do with our beliefs around money, and often these come into play when we're quoting.
Yeah, and you mentioned the hourly rate thing, that if you're working 3 to 5 hours and doing marketing and doing other things during the day that you don't directly charge for, that hourly rate may seem astronomical. $50-$60 an hour may seem like twice what somebody else is earning, but that person is being paid for a 40-hour or 37-hour week, whatever, no matter what they're doing. So I've worked in-house, and and I've seen what what it's like, and how much time is really just spent sort of kicking back and chatting about various things, or being in meetings where you're not actually doing the work. So here's one thing I don't know. I'll throw something out that I do. I charge overhead. So I don't put this as a line item, but when I figure out my hours, I check my time fairly closely, but then I'll usually do 20%, sometimes 25% as an overhead charge. So I will charge for that time that is a little bit extra, because I don't charge for, sort of the mental build-up, the slow down, even bathroom breaks, tend to do it when you're when I'm turn off toggle. So something I have started doing, which feels right for me.
Yes, when I first started in-house, we used to itemize everything on the quote, and we had a project management fee. So that was probably, something to do with that. And then we started getting a lot of pushback from clients, because of course, when they see this breakdown, or, there's all the things you're doing, they're like, oh, we don't want that. We don't need this. Why do we have to have this? I've moved because the agency did a lot of work for government, a lot of government clients, at least at that time, wanted an hourly rate and the number of hours. But when I started doing my own, running my own business, so I did that too to start with, because that's all I knew. But then I remember, learning about project-based pricing, and that really resonated with me, because it shouldn't matter to the client how many hours I take to do their project. What matters to them is the outcome, right? The edited document is returned to them by the deadline. So whether it takes me 10 hours or 15 hours shouldn't matter. It matters to me. Obviously, I'm trying to, make sure I've got enough income to cover the time. But and so I just moved to a project price, and have done that ever since, because I feel that then we're not worrying about how many hours it's going to take. They're not worrying about, questioning how many hours. It just removes that whole thing about the hours. If you think about it compared to other professionals, if someone comes to fix something for you in your house, you just want it fixed quickly, right? And so this is where a lot of tradespeople get into trouble, because they'll come and fix something in 5 minutes and charge whatever it is, and people will complain and say, "But you only spent 5 minutes fixing my block toilet, so why should I pay that much?" But the problem is that then we're sort of equating how much time you spent on the specific document and not your training, your experience, as you said, the time that you're spending thinking about it when you're not actually at the computer. This is so much to that, whereas I like the value of what I do is this much. And obviously it's based on document length and the words and how well it's written and all those things. But to me, I just like the idea of that number, and that's the number, and I'll get it back to you, and then that's the end of the conversation. So yeah, but there's lots of ways to do it. It's to put your hourly rate, to put some admin time, to put the overhead, add the 20% for admin time. Yes, and it just, in the end, again, it's just what works for you, what you feel confident doing.
So you said one of the what do I charge is one of the more common questions you get. What for the podcast and for in general, what is, other than that, the most common question that copy editors or freelancers come to you and want to know?
So it's the pricing. It's also just how to get clients. So. But the other thing I've noticed is that it's really easy to just get hung up on things that don't matter. So this is what I see a lot. It's I can't do anything till I get a website. I can't do any marketing till I get a website. And the problem with that is you can spend a year talking about doing a website and still not doing it. You can spend 6 months agonizing over which platform to use. And so I think that's a trap where a lot of people sort of will say, "Oh, I can't do anything." It's what I call all or nothing thinking. It's like, I can't do anything until I've got these 100 things in place. But really, finding clients, I think one of the things that anyone who's listened to the podcast will know, I'm always going on about having a niche and having very clear messaging. And I think this is a thing, a lot of editors are scared to choose a niche because they think they're going to miss out on work, or they don't, for whatever reason, or they don't feel confident in the niche they want to work in. But I find the easiest way to create good marketing and messaging is to be very clear on who you help and how you help them. So I used to say I worked with academics, but actually it was academics in a very small field. It was, people in health and biological, health and medicine and biological sciences. And then even of that group of academics, usually it's not students, it's staff. It's staff who are time poor and just want their document. They just want someone to look at it, or they've got grant money, or whatever it is. There's a very specific type of person. And when you know the specific type of person you want to help, it's a lot easier to create social media posts or emails or whatever it is to speak directly to that person. And I think the reason a lot of editors struggle to find clients is because they're not really sure who they're helping. They just think, if I just say I'm an editor, that's enough. Well, it's really only enough for anyone who works in publishing who actually knows what that means. And my clients don't care about editing. They just know they've got this document they haven't finished. For me, it's scientists, they just don't feel confident to submit their manuscript to the publisher, to the journal. So it's really just trying to say, do you need someone to help you get it finished? I can do that. They don't care what kind of editing it is. They don't care what I call it. They don't care, they don't care about a lot of things. But a lot of editors write their material as if they're talking to other editors. And the best thing I think you can do is just work out who you help and how you help them. You can change your niche in 6 months if it doesn't work out, but if you have a clear message on the service you provide to a particular type of person, then you can go into those places where they're hanging out and make sure they know about you. And so what I would say is that we're really good at overcomplicating things. And a lot of it is because we don't want to do the thing. So we can, I've spent a year or something researching podcast platforms or whatever it was as an avoidance strategy. It's just better to pick something, do it, try it, connect with those people, and get known as someone who helps those people. And that's the best way to get started. So yeah, most of the questions I get are about, what do I put on my website? How do I get started with marketing? How do I find work? And the best way to find work is just get known by the people you want to help.
Yeah,
and we don't need to make it complicated. We don't need to read more books or learn more things. We just need to actually get out there and connect with people.
Right. That's excellent advice. We did have one. We had a question that I let slip by, so I think we'll get one more question in at least.
Yeah. Molly, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Well, not to beat a dead horse, but I'm just curious what your opinion is about platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, and how they affect not only rates, but the perception of the value of editors' work.
So I've not used those platforms, but what I would say that I think is quite interesting is that I'll see editors who, don't like those sites, but when they need someone to do their website or a designer, something like that, all of a sudden we're happy to use those sites, not necessarily editors. There's a lot of business owners who, charge the rates they charge, but when they want help with their business, they want someone, you'll always see people saying, do you know someone who's good, but affordable or cheap or whatever it is. So, I think it's one of those things that the world, a lot of people in the world just want to find someone who's cheaper, and like I said earlier, that they're not my client. So I think it's a great platform for getting started. If you want to get experience, I've never used it myself, but I don't worry about what people are doing there, because I just get myself in front of people who value what I can do. So, I would never say to anyone, don't use it, but I would say, try it out for yourself. See if you, I think sometimes you hear people saying they've had good experiences, but if it doesn't feel good for you, then just, it's worth taking the time to make connections with people. I think a lot of people use it because they feel it's a great, it provides a service, right? It's providing jobs for editors that don't want to do the marketing. They can go and use that service if they want to, but if you're not getting any work that pays the rates you want, then I think it's really important to just try and find people who will do that. So, the world we live in, it's international. We can work with people all over the world. Depending on what country you're in, your currency might be stronger or weaker than someone else. So I think we're never going to eliminate those things. Humans in general want a bargain. So a lot of people who want a bargain, but there's equally a lot of people who will never use those sites. And like my clients have, yes, I've had people who can't work with me, but my clients are happy to pay my rates, and as long as I've got enough clients. Most editors, if they do the maths, we don't need 1 million clients. We might need a couple of dozen. If you're doing one big project a month or 2 big projects, we can find 24 people who will pay our rates, I think. But we've got to be out there in front of them, and that's the thing. So if we don't want to do that, we have to go to other options. But it's a decision we each have to make as to where we want to spend our time and energy. So again, a non-answer, but
it's an option
in every profession. There'll be people that offer cheap rates and people that, So I think, yes, I just try to find the people who value what we do.
And so I have a dozen more questions, but we've gone through an hour already. We'll have to have you back sometime, and we'll ask all sorts of other things about, maybe we get some specifics of marketing, and talk about some other of your experiences. It's been great to talk to you, and I feel like it just was zipped by. So I hate to let you go.
Yes,
I feel
me
like
too.
we should do another half hour, but I appreciate it, and
I can stay for a few more minutes, but I don't know how long your show goes for.
Yeah, well, it's an hour, so
people
so we should let people. But it's an excuse to have you back some other time. So
happy to come back. No, thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, great to meet you. Thank you so much, and
yes.
We will see you in 2 weeks. We're going to have Corey Stamper back on the show. We had her one of the early shows, the third show, I think, with Steve Kleinedler, and we're going to get her solo. She's going to talk about the new Netflix series on which she appears, the history of swear words, I think it's called. I got the name wrong recently. So that will be a show full of swearing, but we'll also talk to Corey about her new book she's working on. So thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.